episode of BaatCheet Beyond Small Talk. In today's episode, we have somebody very special. We have an Air Force veteran with us, somebody who's a proud ally, a TEDx speaker, welcoming on our show Squadron Leader Delshad Master. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So Delshad, our first question to you is, back in those days, 12 years of service, what was that one thing that inspired you to join the armed forces?
It's been a dream ever since I was in class 2 actually. And back in those days, the Air Force or the armed forces were not even open to women. Right? So I didn't know that. As a child, I always dreamt. It was a very secret dream. I did not reveal it to anyone. I was a very timid child, a very timid, very scared child, right? And but I had this dream. For some reason, I just knew I wanted a life in uniform. And when I got to know that the armed forces does not permit women, that's when I shifted gears and I began focusing on IPS. So I thought I'll write the UPSC and I'll become an IPS officer. By the time I was a graduate, before I was a graduate, I'd already finished reading Kiran Bedi's I Dare, her autobiography, and I was so inspired, I was so motivated. So I was all set to join the IPS. It became a dream, right? Uniformed service. But then class 10, I remember it was a Sunday, first page of the Sunday midday. It proudly proclaimed that the first batch of women officers of the Indian Army passes out of Officers Training Academy with a photo of them marching. They had their passing out parade and they were marching, and that was the photograph. And that's when again, so the police stream got shot out, and then I'm like, okay, now women are permitted in the army, so I'm going to join the army. I had filled up for both the army and the Air Force. Got through the Air Force SSB first. The army call-up never came. So Air Force was. Otherwise, the dream was never Air Force. The dream was always Army, but a uniformed service. That was for sure.
Delshad, I'm getting goosebumps while you speak about your selection. For all of our viewers, would you tell us how is it that the selection process takes place for any armed forces?
Sure. So earlier when I had just joined, there was no written exam, because women entry itself was very, very rare. Very few people applied, relatively. Today there are more and more women that apply for the armed forces, and therefore you have a selection exam before you go to your SSB. Earlier we just had to fill in an application form, but it had to be absolutely to the T, exactly the way the employment news described it, right? You couldn't take a cutout and write over there. You had to rewrite everything the way it was shown in the employment news, fill that up and then submit. If you qualified that, right, then you were called up for the SSB. That was the process. Today you have something called the AFCAT, which is the Air Force Common Admission Test, right? If you clear that, then you get a call up for the SSB. Now the SSB is the Services Selection Board. It's one of the most comprehensive, tough and extremely rigorous interview process ever, right? Because nowhere, I think in no job, not even Google or Amazon or any of your high-paying corporates have a 5-day residential interview, right? So that itself it takes care of every aspect of the candidate, right? So you stay there, which means even when you are not in front of the eyes of the interviewer, you are being assessed. You are being assessed for your camaraderie, you are being assessed for your neatness, the way you stay, the way you make your bed, the way you keep your things, maintain discipline, decorum. If you leave the bathroom dirty, everything, like every little aspect. How you eat, do you crib about the food, do you eat whatever is given to you, all of that, right? So it is that comprehensive, and it checks the person out physically, mentally, psychologically, emotionally. Every aspect of the person is checked, right? And there is something called OLQs, officer-like qualities. So you are basically assessed for OLQs, It doesn't matter if you're a little overweight or you couldn't complete all your physicals or you couldn't finish writing the answers for your psychological test. What matters is whatever you have written, how well have you written that, or how well how well do you get along with your other group mates, right? That is also assessed. In your group tasks, you have your planning tasks, you have your physicals are individual as well as group tasks, right? So all of that is assessed, and then if you clear the SSB, then you go in for your medicals, right? So after a 5-day comprehensive selection process, you go for your medicals. Only after you clear your medicals, then there is a national merit list. So if you make it to the national merit list, you get a call up for the academy.
And what is this percentage of people who get selected eventually?
Now, I think it would be a little more because the number of people who apply are also much higher. The intake for women has also increased, especially in the Air Force. People now view women not just as women but as officers, and it doesn't matter now in the Air Force by and large. Gender has ceased to be an issue. If you are good, if you are up there in the merit list, you get through. So I am guessing, and it's a complete guess, I'm not sure, barely 5% of those who apply make it, like barely. It is tough. It is tough.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is, Delshad, and I'm sure there was a lot of preparation and hard work and sheer passion that went through it. But let's talk about you found your way through Indian Air Force.
Yes.
You went for your training, and this is your day one, and you see there are very few females and most of it was male.
Right.
So what was this difference of your expectations and what you actually saw there?
I was fortunate enough, I was among the fortunate ones to have known what happens, because I had a few friends from the forge. Although I have been a civilian through and through, so I have no one from the family, a distant relative is in the army, but I had absolutely no clue as to what to expect, right?
Okay.
A little bit of background from my Fauji friends, they had told me, but they didn't want to scare me off, so they told me it's going to be tough. In fact, all my Fauji friends, while I was a civilian, dissuaded me from joining the armed forces.
Oh.
They were, why do you want to go ahead and join? Don't join, do something else and all of that. But I was very, very, very determined that I want to be an officer, I want to be in a uniform service. So I knew it's going to be tough, there was no doubt about it. But then you see other women alongside you, and of course men, even today, men are in the majority there and women are much fewer. But those numbers are, the difference is getting lesser and lesser and lesser. Hopefully one fine day we will have both 50-50. I'm hoping that happens. But then, honestly, there is no time to think. So there is no time, where you sit and you brood and kahan aa gaye yaar, ab kya hoga, ab kaise karenge. There is just no time. So once you get into academy, and that's part of the training, that's absolutely pre-planned, right? They don't give you time to think, because the minute you think, you begin to, I would say, defy authority, whereas they want to build you in a way where you are, you listen to orders, you are accepting and you are malleable, right? You can be molded to follow orders. So they do not give you time to think. जहाँ आप think करोगे वहाँ आप you put your foot down and say मैं नहीं करती या मैं नहीं करूँगा या ये क्या होता है, why should I do this, right? So that why I उससे पहले ही they nip it in the bud, and the training is so tough, and it keeps you busy 24/7, right? It literally gives you no time to sleep. It keeps you on your toes all of the time, so that you don't think. For those first 6 months of junior term, you are not allowed to think. You just follow orders and just keep going.
So Delshad, we've always known the armed forces to be this strict and stern and to the T. From that setup to being an ally, or probably you were always an ally, I want to know how was your first episode with LGBTQIA+, your earliest memory related to it.
Okay. So first, let me begin, since you brought up Toastmasters, let me begin by saying that Toastmasters is also very, I would say, very big on allyship, because the first thing that we learn in Toastmasters is you welcome everyone, right? So even that is allyship. Allyship doesn't always have to be in relation to the LGBTQI community alone, right? Any friendship, any support, any aid that you provide to another person makes you an ally, right? And I think Toastmasters really embodies allyship in terms of a person may not even, and I have seen this myself, right? A person who can't stand up and speak for 10 seconds, forget about getting onto the stage, standing up in the audience, right there at his chair, cannot speak for 10 seconds, to going to becoming the president of the club, giving speeches, long speeches, and doing so wonderfully well. So that's the whole Toastmasters journey, because Toastmasters is very encouraging and accepting. So I would say Toastmasters is also all about allyship. But speaking of LGBT allyship, my earliest memory is of a family member, a distant family member on my mother's side, being a trans woman. Back in those days, I did not know what trans is. I did not know why this person, who was back then transitioning from male to female, was behaving differently and looked very differently, and so much so that my mother's aunt, right, she wouldn't permit me to look at him or see him or talk to him. My mother forbade me, right? When I asked questions about him, I was told to, shut up, don't bother. All you need to remember is, if you see him on the road, if you see him anywhere, stay away. Don't ignore. आंखें मत मिलाओ, ठीक है, बातें नहीं करो, ठीक है, just cut away from this person. No need to associate with this person. I did not understand back then, but all I know is that even back then, I used to feel very guilty, because I would meet him quite often and we would come face to face, and I would look the other way and walk away, because as a child, again, like I said, I was timid and I was very, very obedient. So if I was told to do something, I did that, right? And somewhere deep down, I always felt like, why, what? He's never done any harm to me. He is a little different. I used to see people stare away at him without knowing, without understanding what it is that my parents were keeping me away from, right? That was my initial first memory. Later on, when I began working, after I came out of the forge, I began working for a marketing company, and one of their not-for-profit verticals was a magazine for the LGBTQI community called 50 Shades of Gay. And I began writing personal interest stories for them. I began researching, and that's when my curiosity grew. I began learning, reading up, studying about the community, meeting people from the community, knowing about them, learning their pain points, and then that became my foot in the door to becoming an ally. And then it all came back to me, right? That, oh, this person was actually trans. Today, of course, she's living a beautiful, fulfilling life as a wonderful woman. Most people today who know her don't even know that she used to be, she had transitioned. And she is now, thankfully, we had a reunion of sorts, and we are great friends today. It's come full circle, and she doesn't even remember instances when I tell her that, I used to look the other way, or I used to ignore, or that's what I was told to do, and I feel so bad, because I always had this thing where I wanted to ask her forgiveness. That's always been a thing since the time I got to know who she actually is, and how I have also been a part of discrimination, how I have also played my part in showing prejudice and bias towards her, right?
Yes.
So we reunited, we are great friends now. But yeah, so that was the first instance. But my awakening happened once I started working for 50 Shades of Grey.
There is so much that we do without even knowing that we are, especially when we are children. Delshad, I come from a girls' school.
Right.
And in our girls' school, so much so that whoever were the monitors, I was generally the monitor of the class, and the teachers would tell us, write names of the girls who are holding hands. And back then I thought, oh my god, they're doing something that I should complain about. And now I realize that all of this was so unnecessary. So we are still a long way from bringing the society on the same page.
Correct.
So Dilshad, as I was saying about my schooling, and then I had always had a little interest of what is this LGBTQIA all about. And initially, I was just figuring out the full forms of each of it, and then I stuck to queer. And I told my friends, so these people are the folks who has total knowledge of genders and sexualities. That's it. That makes you queer. And then my friend said, no, that makes you human. And I was also that was one of the moments for me where I thought that this is something we should read more about, know more about. And while I was researching on you, I saw that QSC had a lot of, it was mentioned at a lot of places on your profile. So tell us what that is.
Okay. So on all my social media platforms, I go by the acronym QSC, which stands for Queer Sensitization Catalyst. Now, I would like to think that these three letters are kind of self-explanatory, and I'll explain why. So, queer, the first word, right? Now, queer is an umbrella term for anyone who is not cisgendered and heterosexual, which means the sex assigned at birth by a medical professional, okay, is the gender that you grow up to identify as. When you are born, you don't come out saying I'm a girl or I'm a boy, right? Somebody else looks at the genitals and declares that the child is a male or a female child, right? So that's the sex. That's the sex of the child, okay? If you grow up to affirm and to concur that yes, I am a female and my gender is female, then that person or that child is called cisgender. So if your sex matches your gender, you are cisgender, right? And heterosexual, hetero means opposite, homo means same, okay? And it's not used only in terms of sexuality. You use it, homogeneous mixture, homogeneous crowd, so the term homo is used at multiple places, just like heterogeneous mixture, right? We've used it in chemistry, we've used it in English itself, it was quite a heterogeneous crowd or a homogeneous crowd, these kind of things. So hetero means opposite, homo means same. Now if you are heterosexual, it means you are attracted to the opposite sex, right? The opposite gender, right? So anybody who is cisgendered heterosexual, right, is not queer, okay? Because cisgendered heterosexuals form the majority, and the majority has decided for itself that जो भी हमारे जैसा नहीं होगा या people who are not like us are supposed to be abnormal or queer. So queer initially was used as a slur. It was used as a way of looking down on people who were not cisgendered heterosexual. Why? Purely because this was the majority, so this was the way you were supposed to fit into these two boxes alone and nothing else. Right? So anybody who didn't fit into these two boxes was considered abnormal or queer. And then after the revolution in America in the 70s, the term queer was reclaimed. And they said we are queer and we're proud of being queer. So the term was reclaimed. Right? Like today, black people are very proud of their black lineage. Right? They're very proud of their heritage and their skin color, and they're very open about it, right? So earlier what was a slur is today a symbol of identity and pride. So same thing meant for queer. So anyone who is not cisgender heterosexual, which means you're lesbians, bisexual, gays, pansexual, asexual, all these identities come under the umbrella term queer. Right? So everyone who is anywhere on the letter soup, this LGBTI letter soup falls under queer. Then the word sensitization. So sensitization is all about me using my power of speech, power of writing, power of training, explaining to sensitize these cisgendered heterosexuals, the majority, about this little minority. Okay? I won't say little. They are a minority, but they're not little anymore. They are quite a number, they are all around us, it's just that we don't see, we don't realize it, right? So I use my strengths and my skills to sensitize cisgendered heterosexuals about the queer community. And catalyst again is quite self-explanatory, like we learned in chemistry. Catalyst is any substance that's introduced in a reaction, right, which accelerates the reaction without itself undergoing any change, right? So the word catalyst really fit in because I am cisgender heterosexual, but I try and accelerate the sensitization process of cisgender heterosexuals towards the queer community, right? So I speak for the community without belonging to the community and try and speeden up, hasten, soften the process for cisgender heterosexuals. So that's what QSC stands for.
So from Squadron Leader Delshad, queer sensitization catalyst Delshad, you must be hearing so many stories every day and
Yes.
trying to tell those stories back to
Yes.
so many people.
Yes.
So was it or is it difficult to first convey it to family, elders, youngers than the others?
For me, most of it happened during COVID, and I was staying away from home. I was in Bangalore. Most of the sessions that I conducted, meetings that I attended, a lot of Toastmasters meetings, people heard about what I speak on, what I write about, and they would call me to speak about it. So a lot of that happened during COVID, and my way of introducing it to my family was just to send them the recording. Like this recording itself, I'll just send it across to them, and that's how they heard about me, because dad, my aunt, I mean everyone in my family is not really on social media at all. My dad has just, like a couple of months back, got introduced to WhatsApp. He didn't even have a smartphone. My aunt has a smartphone, but again, she's not on any other social media platforms. So they wouldn't have found out otherwise. Okay, it's either I would have told them, or then instead of me sitting and telling them that this is what I do or this is what I've begun doing, it started off as a passion. So it didn't start off as a means of earning money or becoming a consultant in this field. That happened later, and that happened very organically. Right? It started off as a passion because when I used to work for 50 Shades of Grey, when I used to write for them and all that, that's the things that I learned. I was so eager to tell people. Like I would come home every day and talk to friends, talk to family. I just want to tell people that I met this person today, I heard their story, and this is what they had to say, and they've attempted suicide these many times, and they've self-harmed, and they've done this, they've done that. So I was so eager. So it started off as a passion. I began speaking, I began writing about it, and then it kind of grew. So I would just take those recordings, send them home, and initially I was expecting a lot of rejection. What is this? What nonsense are you doing, and why are you doing all of this? Right? But that never happened. In fact, they were very proud. They were very happy, and my aunt was very vocal about her happiness and pride. Dad, not so much, but Dad's never, he's never said anything otherwise. He's actually proud. He doesn't say it as much, but I know that.
Such a heartwarming story of pride, bringing pride. It's just the full circle. So Delshad, now we spoke about the pride that pride has brought to you and how you introduced it to your circle.
Okay.
According to you, what would a truly inclusive society look like?
So let me begin by answering or telling you a little about bias. Right? We are all biased.
Yes.
All of us. We have different biases, but we are all biased. Now, being biased is actually not a bad thing. It is a very good thing, because it is the thing which ensures that the human race and the human species survives. Right? You had different kind of biases. As hunter-gatherers, we would go out in the forest and know when danger is approaching, whom to fear, whom not to fear. An outsider joining the group, should the person be let in? Should the person be killed? Should we fight the person? Should we include the person? All of that. So that is how far back bias stems from, right? Bias is nothing but your mind giving you signals as to this is your in circle and this is an outsider. Now decide quickly within a split second, do you want the person in or do you want the person out? Right? That's what bias and prejudice is all about. And that's how the in circle and the out circle came to be, right? But we have evolved since then. But the bias and prejudice that came along with being hunter-gatherers has continued to stay with us, right? And we keep having these in-groups, out-groups, even unconsciously now. It is so ingrained and so deeply ingrained into us over the centuries that, typically, so questions like, okay, where are you from, right? What are we trying to decipher? Is this person like, is this person known to me? Like, can I connect with the person over language? Can I connect with the person over food? Are you veg or non-veg? Right? I'm not saying those questions are not to be asked. I'm just saying that we still keep having our in-groups and out-groups, right? The way it affects us has changed, right? And now we are no longer asking in order to kill or to protect ourselves, but now it has become part of routine conversation, right? And because it has become part of routine conversation, sometimes we don't realize that those questions could be hurtful. Those comments, those stereotypes can really hurt a person. Like, how many times have we as women heard, गोरी है धूप में मत जा काली पड़ जाएगी? It's not about काला पड़ जाना is one. काला पड़ जाना is definitely a stereotype, but काली पड़ जाएगी तो कोई शादी नहीं करेगा. Correct? So imagine the stereotypes, all these stereotypes coming together. First, because you're a woman. Second, about your skin color. Okay? Third, the assumption that people marry only if you're fair. Right? So, and if you don't succumb, if you don't agree to all this and you still go out in the sun, then ये तो पक्का टॉमबॉय है, इससे शादी कौन करेगा? इसकी शादी में कितनी दिक्कतें आएंगी?
और the fact that शादी is important, right? हाँ,
तुझसे शादी कौन करेगा? Right? Comments like these, okay, over a period of time, again and again and again, build a lot of anxiety, a lot of rejection in the person they are aimed at. And with this, let me also tell you that we are all victims and perpetrators. All of us have at some point or the other said something to someone which, we think that itna hi to tha, it was just a joke, yaar, I didn't mean it, or I am actually caring for her, no, I am telling her don't go out, dhoop lag jayegi and all that. How is that bias? How is that prejudice, right? So we are all victims at one point and we are all perpetrators at some point or the other. So I don't think an ideal society will be completely free of bias. I think that, like I said, it's ingrained, inbuilt in us. That's what kept us safe. That is what kept our species going. So that's going to continue. It's just about being aware of the unconscious biases that we carry in our head, and then making that extra effort to be a little more cautious the next time we are addressing someone, or we are talking about people based on generalized stereotypes. Okay, like if I know my friend to be a miser, and if I am making fun and I say, "Hey, you are the kanjus only," then that's okay. But it's not okay to say, you are this community, no, you are born kanjus. I mean, that's not right? So it's okay to know the person and talk about the person, and that too if it's a friend and you're kidding with your friend, that's fine. But to generalize and stereotype and say that, since you're from this community or your community, all duffers only, all ये तो सारे ऐसे ही होते हैं, ये तो सारे कंजूस होते हैं, ये तो सारे मतलब greedy होते हैं. That's incorrect. So an ideal society should be one where, first of all, these things are taught and kids are made aware, right? And mutual respect is taught, right? And generalized stereotypes are systematically removed or eliminated over a period of time. So that would be an ideal society. It wouldn't be one without bias. In fact, that would make us unsafe again, right? So a certain amount of bias is good. Okay, like when women go out alone or when women are in the night, you have a certain radar, right, that goes around, and you're getting into a cab or you're getting into a bus. You instinctively know whom you are safe with, whom you're not safe with. That's bias at work. That is bias at work. So bias will always play a role in keeping us safe. You cannot eliminate bias, you should not eliminate bias. If you do that, it's going to be disastrous, right? So we shouldn't eliminate bias. We should be more aware of our biases, and we should teach our children about these things so that they grow more aware as to what and how to speak, how to conduct themselves, how to gradually eliminate stereotypes, right? Bias is a good thing. Bias actually is meant to protect us. But who are we using it against? How are we using it against? Are we generalizing? Okay, are we using it for our own safety, or are we just using it to discriminate against people? So yeah, that would be my ideal society, one where this is taught.
Wow, Delshad, I remember this speech that I had written. It started with the song "Tu cheez bariya mast mast," and I was going to speak about how women are objectified. And my entire speech depended on, I would go on stage and I would say "Tu cheez bariya," and people would say "mast mast." And it happened. First speech, first audience, second audience, and I always had this bias in my head that they will sing this song back because they are objectifying us. And then there came one specific club where nobody sang it, and that was my eye-opening moment as well, that I am also being biased towards the men, maybe.
Yeah.
So what you said, I'm just remembering all this has happened and all these keeps happening.
Right.
Delshad, talking of activism and society and changing, what is it that we can do to bring about a change?
So, like I mentioned, awareness about stereotypes, awareness about. I love to use this term where I say Google yourself, and by that I don't mean opening the Google browser and typing your name. Google yourself at a much deeper level, at an introspective level, right? So begin there. We all set out to change the world, only to come back and realize that the only person that needed changing was us, right? That's very oft repeated thing, that you can't change others. The only thing you can change is yourself and your ability to face any circumstance, right? So Google yourself, introspect, find out where your biases lie, your prejudices lie. Where do they stem from? Do they stem from some experiences you had? Do they stem from something that's just been taught to you and fed to you from the beginning? Where do these prejudices originate? And now, at this age, as a learned adult, as an experienced adult, do these still hold good? Have you come across instances where you have been surprised with the reverse? And if so, then should you still hold on to those biases and prejudices, right? So let's not first go and say, what should we do as a society? We are all society, right? Each one of us is society, and if we just introspect, if we just Google ourselves, like at a really deep level, right, and find out where our biases lie, where our prejudices lie, what ticks us off, right, and why does it tick us off? Okay, can we look at things differently now? Is our experience going to decide who we are and how we behave, or are we willing to see things a little differently? Many times I come across people give me examples of how trans women on the streets have accosted them, how trans women have looted them, how trans women have they've abused them, all of that, right? Now I understand that they've had an experience, so I'm not invalidating that experience, but what you need to understand is, with that experience, you are labeling an entire section of people, right? Similarly, there are cases of dowry. There have been cases of, where the females are burned, suicide. Did India stop marrying their daughters? India didn't, right? There have been cases of people dying out of stress in the IT industry, in many industries, not just IT, so many industries. Did people stop working the next day? They didn't. Then why does your one experience with a couple of trans women or with one trans woman completely stereotype the entire sect of trans persons, right? So we don't stop getting married, we don't stop working in the IT, we don't stop, there are accidents on the road, you don't stop driving the next day, right? So we need to begin to introspect and find where these biases and prejudices are coming from. Even if you're coming from experience, experiences can always be changed. As children, as a child, you may have had a bad experience in a BST, in a public transport bus. Did you stop traveling by bus altogether? You didn't. You grew up, you realized that was one-off. Either I need to protect myself better, either I need to be more guarded, or the fact that I have done this mistake and therefore this experience happened, let me be a little more careful and so that it doesn't happen. We think so rationally and logically when it comes to other experiences. But when it comes to queer experiences, we try to label and stereotype people and say, oh, I've had this one experience, मैं तो दूर ही रहता हूँ. When I see a trans woman, I run in the opposite direction. Oh, gay man, oh my God, no. What if he has a crush on me? What if it?
Yeah, all the time. And you will surprisingly you will see all of these disappearing the moment it's June and corporates are putting in banners and flyers.
Yes, yeah, suddenly, correct. Rainbow washing, right? Just like you have pink washing is for March, there is rainbow washing in June. Correct. So that again is very, very incorrect. That also reeks of bias, right? Suddenly in June you become all inclusive, and the rest of the 11 months you are like completely no. Let's get all the flags off. Let's not talk about it. No, वो सब जून के लिए ठीक है, not for any other month.
But as Toastmasters, as a community, you briefly touched upon how we are allies as Toastmasters in general.
Yes.
Do you think that there is something that we can do in terms of speaking up, in terms of awareness as Toastmasters?
Certainly. So again, let me go back to why I said Toastmasters are allies, right? Irrespective of your ability and capability of being a good speaker, you as a Toastmaster from the very beginning are taught never to discriminate against someone who is, let's say, a little insecure about their speech, or who's underconfident, or who cannot come up on stage and speak, right? So you are being an ally there. Okay, you are not being biased, no matter how capable you may be as a speaker. You could be a DTM, or twice DTM, or thrice DTM, whatever be it, right? You are not biased against a person who is just learning to speak or just gaining confidence, right? If we apply the same principles, okay, to the queer community as well, okay, no matter what your sexuality is or what your gender identity is, all you need to remember is you cannot live someone else's life, neither can you dictate how they live theirs. Right? So if that is the guiding principle, I think we can all be allies. The other thing in Toastmasters, which I don't know where it comes from, I have not seen it written anywhere, I have not heard anybody internationally speaking about this, but we have a tendency to begin the Toastmasters meeting by laying down the ground rules, one of which is we do not speak of sex, religion, sex, religion and politics, right? I personally feel that when these topics are touched upon to bring about change, to bring about awareness, to bring about education, these topics play a vital role in shaping another person's thinking, another person's personality. So instead of being averse to such topics, let's bring these discussions out in the open, right? Let's talk about things which have been put in shrouds for generations together, and then which have shaped thinking, right? Which have shaped people into believing that these are taboo topics. These should not be spoken of, right? The minute you don't speak of politics means that you are not involved in your country as a aware citizen. And if you are not involved as an aware citizen, then why are you talking about voting rights? Why are you talking about each person should go and vote? You refuse to talk of politics, then why do you encourage people to vote? Similarly, whether it's religion, sex, as long as it takes care not to harm someone, you're not, you're doing it largely for awareness. You're doing it largely to spark a discussion on the subject. I think it should be permitted. Everyone should be allowed to speak their mind in Toastmasters, and that's the way Toastmasters can play catalyst in shaping the next generation.
Surprisingly, Toastmasters never told anybody to not talk about any topic.
Exactly.
You've just
Exactly.
perceived it in a certain way. And I'm glad that it's changing.
Correct.
I was speaking to DTM Saurav the other day and he brought out the same points, and it's nice how every club is taking their corrective measures now to change. We spoke about officer-like quality, Delshad, in the beginning, and throughout our discussion, I saw all of those qualities just spark out of you. You are full of energy, you have so much passion, and I've seen a lot of veterans having the same amount of passion and wanting to do so much, and you have done so much for the country and still doing so much for the community. What is it that is driving you through all of this?
Okay. So Abhishita, let me begin by saying that I think every person who joins the forge is driven, right? It's difficult to join the armed forces purely for self-gain. It's not just difficult, it will come across, it will come through in your SSV itself. If you're greedy and only self-fulfilling, right? Our inclination towards service and our passion towards service comes even before we join the forge, because joining the forge itself is an act of service to the nation. While a civilian would work for themselves, for their family, it's a small world of your own which you are catering to, right? Your energy, your life resources are going towards feeding and the upbringing of your loved ones, your family. A forgee, on the other hand, has all of this. So it's not like a forgee doesn't have a family. Forgee also needs to feed his family, clothe his family, educate his family, his or her family. But a forgee works for a much greater goal, a much greater purpose, right? So from day one, we don't call it social service, but it is service to the country is what drives us to begin with, right? The minute you wear your uniform, you take an oath to die for if required, right? You give up some of your fundamental rights as a service person, which, by the way, is not prevalent in any other service. So you have your UPSC, which is again very highly regarded, and it should be. They do have a tough training, they have a tough selection process. Some of your politicians don't enjoy a good rep in India, but so all these are there, but not as much as a fortune, right? Even a politician, when they are shot dead, it's like, the SPG gets in the way, or some uniformed person tries to protect them. So you are doing that for no personal self-gain or personal selfish reason, right? And in the forge, you're ready to take a bullet for your country. You don't even know whom you're saving, right? You're foregoing your chuttis, your family functions, your get-togethers, your family life as a whole, right? You could be away from your spouse for the longest time. You could not have a presence in your own child's life for years together, and you're doing all of this for your country, right? For a much greater goal, a much greater purpose. So I would say forges are driven from the very beginning. It is that drive which gets you into forge. It's that drive which sustains you through your career in forge. So it's very difficult to take that drive out just because you are not in uniform anymore. I think that drive continues. Forges fortunately have the inclination to direct that same energy and passion into whatever else they choose to do. But because by and large they have always served a greater goal, right? It's very difficult for a forgee to sit down and think in selfish terms, right? कि अब मैं business करूँगा और सिर्फ business, वो भी I'm not saying वो गलत है. All I'm saying is you'll always find a forgee doing a little bit more. So
you're not just wired that way.
Yeah, even if they are doing a business, it'll either be for the benefit of society, or they will probably help other forgees and other forgee families that have been widowed, children who have had forgee parents, right? So a forgee's drive will always sustain through their life for one good or the other. So even if they've come out of uniform, let's say today they are not serving the country directly as part of the armed forces, they'll still find some other goal, some other passion, some other cause to work for, which is for the greater good and not just for selfish gain. So I think that kind of underscores the fabric of being a Fauji. And that's what's kept me going, right? I am fortunate, not many people find their purpose in life. They say like it's difficult to, come up to your ikigai. I mean, everybody speaks of ikigai, very few people speak of, oh, I have found my ikigai. I'm one of the fortunate few where I can say that, I have found my ikigai in sensitizing people about the queer community, right? Similarly, there are quite a few Faujis that I know. Some are working towards water conservation, some are working towards education of children, some are working for women afflicted by domestic violence. So, so many Faujis that I know are driven and passionate about the cause that they have come to identify with. I think that's what drives us. Service to the country, in uniform or out of it.
Wow, Delshad, every word that you say, I just wish I could just sit with a salute position for you all through this podcast, Delshad. It was eye-opening, and I hope we will inspire a lot of people to join the defense, to become QSC. I hope a lot of us become QSCs by the end of the episode. It was an absolute honor and a privilege to have you. Thank you so much for being a part of BaatCheet. In conversation with the Squadron Leader QSC Delshad. Thank you for viewing our BaatCheet Beyond Small Talk, where we talk about the comfortable and the uncomfortable. If you liked our episode, please go, like, share and subscribe to our channel. Follow District 92 Toastmasters, where leaders are defined.